Welcome to the launch of Restore Scotland, a new political party for Scotland. For many, 2020 will be remembered as the year of the pandemic, but it was also a year which marked the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath, a document which changed the trajectory of Scottish political history and Western civilization. It was also the year in which Restore Scotland first met as a political party. And today, in March of 2021, we're going to get out and about and meet some of the people that are involved with Restore Scotland to find out how they intend to restore Scotland.
Well, currently there is no party in the Scottish Parliament that represents those that believe in full independence for Scotland. That's independence from the United Kingdom and from the European Union. Restore Scotland is trying, or will attempt to fill that gap. We will speak up for those that have been voiceless, that have been cut out of the political debate, and we will make the case, the logical case, the emotional case, the rational case for Scotland to be fully independent. We are, as Scots, a nation, one of Europe's ancient nations, and one of Europe's few nations that doesn't have statehood. And that's why I think it's critically important at this juncture, as we're moving closer to independence, but the battle for independence from the European Union has still not yet been won. That's why I think it's critically important that we have a party in there fighting for full freedom for Scotland from the UK and the EU.
Well, basically, Restore Scotland will be offering an opportunity or a home for those people in Scotland who want the country to remain outside of the EU, because I think the SNP will be putting it to the vote, or certainly some members are asserting that. And if they do, then we have to have the organisation on the ground to channel the energies and the desires of those people living in Scotland who do not want us to rejoin the EU. So that's why I think that the Restore Scotland is going to provide an invaluable role, and be absolutely crucial that they are presenting an alternative.
I think the battle for independence from the European Union is very far from being won. We have a majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, even a majority of MSPs on the nationalist side, that want to throw away newfound independence for Scotland at the earliest opportunity and see Scotland readmitted on a fast-track schedule into the European Union. And what sort of independence is that? We won't have, at that point, full control over our own foreign policy. We won't have independent defence policy. We'll not be able to sign our own treaties. Scots law won't have primacy over any other body of man-given law. So I think that what we have is the battle of our lifetime coming up over the next generation to make sure that we gain independence from the United Kingdom, but also that having won that independence, we subsequently keep it. And I think there are other important battles at the moment as well. We've seen the SNP government pass legislation in recent months to allow them basically to backdoor EU law into the law of Scotland. This is unnecessary. It will lead to further regulation, further micromanagement of ordinary people's daily lives. And worst of all, we don't have any say in that legislation. Not that we had much when we were in the European Union anyway, because it's all the European Commission's work. But now we have none at all. It's just basically being passed as regulations through the Scottish Parliament.
I think that justice is absolutely the prime consideration of any government and that we should strive for equality and fairness, and that has to be a very strong and major platform, for any government, and that's certainly something that is a very, very important and crucial element in Restore Scotland's ambitions.
I think very much the heart has gone out of the SNP's fight for independence in recent years. It's become a glib mantra for many of the hierarchy. I think we've seen them become increasingly comfortable with their Holyrood salaries, and particularly their Westminster salaries. They are down there huffing and puffing, making noise, and not really achieving very much. They have not been playing hardball with the Tory government on the fight for independence. And I think that is inexcusable in a circumstance where they have an incredible democratic mandate that is there primarily to deliver the Scottish people's desire for independence. We've seen a flurry of polls showing comfortable majorities for Scottish independence. And I think it's time for the SNP to start delivering. And I think it's also very clear to many of their own members that they no longer believe that they can deliver, at least in the short term. So a new voice standing up and fighting for full freedom for Scotland from the European Union and from the United Kingdom is needed. And that fight will only be won if we are willing to make sacrifices, that we're willing to put country before personal financial position, as many of the MPs and MSPs clearly appear to have done.
Sovereignty to me goes back a long time. Well, it goes back to the Scottish people telling the King that if he doesn't behave himself, basically he'll be removed. And through claims of right, Scottish constitutions, constitutional conventions, and everything else, the notion in Scotland that the people are sovereign remains. Nothing has ever undermined that apart from the SNP, which, of all people, they're the last people that should have undermined the concept. But it's uniquely different, and so much so that it was emulated by the founder members of the American Constitution, Tom Paine, people like that. And you can see the seeds of our Declaration of Arbroath in the American Constitution, government by the people, for the people. Quite the reverse of anything that we've got in the UK nowadays. But that unique concept is still there to be grasped. Grasp the thistle rather than the nettle, if you like. But no political party has the gift to prejudge what the Scottish people will vote for. And if they're shying away from another referendum, then they're doing the wrong thing. It's referendum we need. It's multi-referendums. We need a referendum on the monarchy, on nuclear situation. We need a referendum on joining the WI if we need it. But we do need it, and they shouldn't be scared of it. And they shouldn't be scared of Article 50 either.
Well, we're up here in Banshire and Buchan Coast, and we're in Banff. We have Macduff in the background here. I work in Turriff, just outside the constituency, but this is an area that historically has had a lot of scepticism about the European Union. And one of the reasons for that is that the fishing industry has been sold down the water by the Common Fisheries Policy. The Scottish seas, the seas that should be the exclusive right of Scottish boats to fish, are currently open to all comers from the European Union. The deal carved out by the Conservatives during the Brexit negotiations basically handed a tiny part of that right to these fishing waters back to Scottish fishermen. So the businesses, the industries, and all the industries that are dependent on fishing and agriculture as well, they know the cost of dealing with Europe, and it exacts a heavy toll. And so we believe that we have a chance by speaking up for those in this area that are double outers, that want out of the UK and the European Union, that have for decades since the SNP capitulated on the Europe issue, have had no one speaking up for them. So 30 years of silence from this large and I believe growing segment of the Scottish population. And we aim to be a voice for the voiceless in these circumstances. And so that's why we're beginning here. That's why we're beginning in an area where people have suffered possibly more than most as a result of having their livelihoods taken from them by central diktat from Brussels.
I was a lifelong supporter of independence and for many years was a member of the SNP, held office at branch, CA and national level. I was in the National Organisation Committee, and I claim responsibility for the Say No to the Poll Tax, SNP, whatever that's called. You know, they publicised that. I wasn't maybe exclusively behind that, but I sparked the idea. And I was an election agent for Neil Johnston back in the 80s, increased the constituency vote by 60%, made it winnable for Fergus Ewing.
Well, I joined the party when I was 19 in 1966, and I've been a supporter and a member of the party ever since, and was the branch chairman in Huntly and the election agent for Aberdeenshire West back in the early 70s. So I've always been an advocate of independence for Scotland, and what I've found most difficult recently when canvassing on the doorsteps is being asked the question of why does the SNP want independence from Westminster and yet want to rejoin the EU and surrender our sovereignty to Brussels. And I found that question impossible to answer because it's a total contradiction. And I've been wrestling with this now, with this dilemma for months, and finally decided that a party that was advocating independence for Scotland, both from London and from the EU, was really the party that I wanted to support and put my energies and resources into.
I stand, as I always have done, for sovereign independence, and sovereignty is not a delegatable quotient. You know, it's you can't be partly sovereign. We said at the time that you can't be, you can't be mildly pregnant, and you can't be slightly dead, and nor can you be slightly independent unless you're being misled. And misled is what the party has been for the last 30 years.
I think it's very clear that a majority of MSPs in Holyrood are keen for Scotland to rejoin the European Union as soon as possible. Some of them have an almost fanatical commitment to this, and this is a commitment that runs contrary to their protestations about wanting Scotland to be independent. You cannot have true independence in the European Union. The European Union has all the makings of a state. It has a president, it has a parliament with very limited democratic oversight, it's got an extensive civil service, they're working on trying to form a European army, there's common European defence policy, Europe signs its own treaties, and European Union law is supreme, it has primacy. So the idea of being independent in Europe is an oxymoron. It's the biggest fallacy, the biggest lie that is being sold to the Scottish people, that you can be independent and in the European Union. But I would also say that we're a party of Europhiles. We love Europe as a continent. We are Europeans, and we want to have great relations with the nations of Europe, the other countries in Europe, those that are in the European Union and not. We just want to make our own laws, make our own way in the world.
You know, Scotland's an ancient European nation, and it will be yesterday, today and tomorrow. We are European and we will remain European, but that doesn't mean to say we have to be members of a capitalist supremacist union that wants to deny the nation state.
I think what SNP is doing at the moment with domestic policy is deeply troubling. And I think particularly over the past 2 or 3 years we've started to see a strongly authoritarian edge to some of the policies that they have announced. Liberties that Scots for centuries have just taken for granted, such as the freedom of speech, have come under attack with the hate crime bill, for example, with some incredibly draconian penalties, including up to 7 years in prison for being offensive. So we have a situation now where we're having to stand up and make the case for things that are so fundamental to our democratic and parliamentary processes, because those people that we entrusted with that right to speak for us have turned around and are now working to deny us that very same right in our day-to-day life, even in our homes. And I think that's exceptionally troubling. I think the coronavirus pandemic, while elements of the government's response have been very positive, much of it, unfortunately, has been extremely bad for liberty. And we've seen the shuttering of small businesses up and down the country. We've seen people dying in care homes, separated from their loved ones, their spouses, the people they spent their life with, and not really given the option, not really told, well, if it's a choice between, you know, having your passing moments with your husband or your wife, or dying on your own, people are not being consulted in these matters. We're having government rule by diktat, by edict, and it's got to change. It's got to stop. We need to recover the democratic spirit that Scotland has been famous for centuries. And so that's what Restore Scotland will be campaigning for, that's what we'll be championing, and we're looking for candidates, we're looking for election agents, volunteers, members up and down the country that represent that mainstream in Scottish society, the centre ground of Scottish society that still believes in freedom, that still trusts the institutions of society to make decisions on things like speech and matters of life and death for itself.
I think there's always space for another political party if they seek to do things better. I was quite devastated to hear about the passing of the hate crime bill this past week. Not because I condone violence or discrimination, but because I'm a great believer in the freedom of speech, the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression. And I feel like the SNP government, who have for a long time prided themselves on diversity, but yet are not open to diversity of opinion. And that is concerning for me. And as someone who has voted SNP in the past, I have huge regrets. I very much believe in the sovereignty of Scotland. I would love to see Scotland becoming an independent nation. But I do not have confidence that the SNP government can do this with a level of equality for all.
It's this kind of obsession with interfering and controlling and poking your nose into private homes, where now people would be afraid to say anything in case it was construed as being a hate crime. Even the most flippant, off-the-hand remark could make you guilty. And I just think that, as do a lot of people that think seriously that this is not something that the government should be involved in.
My family doesn't support Labour anymore. My dad only refers to Labour with unmentionable words that I couldn't mention on the camera. Or SNP for that matter, but that's a lot to do with recent events. There's a lot of things about SNP, this my whole family are feel this way. For example, this draconian hate speech bill that they're thinking about bringing in. But more than that, definitely the way that people's livelihoods have been taken away because of lockdowns. There's just so much that these lockdowns have done to people, because they talk about COVID causing this, It's lockdowns that have caused this. Whether or not COVID is as dangerous as we're being told it is, it's the government. Both in Westminster, I know we're talking about Scotland, but in Westminster and Scotland, it's definitely the government that's to blame for, like, people not being able to go to work, not being able to earn a living, be able to put food in their kids' mouths or put food on the table.
No child should have to go hungry. No child should fall asleep in a cold house. I think no parent should have to worry about whether they can clothe or feed their kids. And I think the current benefit system that the UK government have put into place it's constructed by people who are not living in poverty. It's constructed by people who see this online system, for example, as an efficient way to get things done, but it's not efficient for the people who have to go through it. It's not efficient for the people who have to fill out these forms and who have to muddle their way through it with little support.
I genuinely don't feel there is any political party that represents the interests of the working man or woman. It's politics as usual. There needs to be a party that does represent, I don't want to get too tied up in the idea of working class, I think a party that just represents the working class is no good for anybody. It needs to represent everybody, but it definitely needs to look at, if you bring the working class up by their bootstraps, so to speak, if you help them to get up by their bootstraps, you're going to have a more equal society, you're going to have a fairer society, you're going to have a better society. We're on this together, I know there's not a lot, there's people out there, particularly politicians, that don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that's definitely, we need to stand together. As a small nation, it's absolutely imperative that we don't let division get to us, and division definitely seems to be sown with all the bickering that you see all the time on when you see what's going on in Holyrood,
I feel like both the Scottish and the UK government are quite out of touch with the average family. I feel like decisions are made at government level, and it kind of trickles down through local authorities, in through our education system, into our households. But I don't feel, as a mother of 3, that I've been consulted about a lot of what takes place, or a lot of what myself and my husband are expected to the way that we're expected to conduct ourselves as parents. Even being part of, you know, a parent council in you know, the primary school my kids go to, it's okay if I want to be involved in raising funds or talking about issues like parking outside the school, but when it comes to sort of, truthfully to me, more important topics like, you know, attainment or, you know, issues of morality that are discussed within schools, these issues are, these decisions are made at government level, and so therefore schools, individual schools have no say, even local authorities have no say really. The decisions are made at that higher level and are then passed down and expected to be implemented. And sometimes I feel like as families we are quite clueless, or, you know, sort of on a much more concerning level, we're quite powerless.
So at Restore Scotland, we believe in a Scotland that is sovereign, just and free. So we believe that decision making in Scotland should be in the hands of the Scottish people, that all of the key constitutional decisions that will be made in the run-up to independence and following independence should be taken and led by the people of Scotland themselves. We believe in a country that is just, that doesn't give favours to people based on their wealth or their status, but that gives equal justice to all. And we believe in a country that's free, where individual liberties are stood up for, the freedom of speech, freedom of movement, privacy, all of these are critical freedoms, the right to life. And so that is the Scotland that we want to see. That is the vision for Scotland that we will be fighting for. This is not a vision for an independent Scotland that the SNP or the Scottish Greens believe in. In fact, it's not clear, based on some of the recent pronouncements from the leadership of those parties, how bothered they are about independence at all. Because what we have seen is a cadre of MPs and MSPs and other senior officials very comfortable with their salaries, very comfortable with their 80,000 plus a year from the House of Parliament. And we will never abandon the Scottish people like this. We will always put the battle for Scottish independence first and foremost, because it is only once we are free as a people, once we are independent, that all of these other values that Scots hold dear can start to be realised in this country.
So there you have it. This has been the launch of Restore Scotland. A different kind of launch to ensure our compliance with the current lockdown restrictions. But if you find yourself, like many of the people you have met, passionate about the future of Scotland but politically homeless, then please get in contact with us. You can reach us on restorescotland.org, even if it's just to have a conversation with us, but you can also join as a member there. And you can also find us on social media at the links in the description. Thank you.